Right, we're starting this hour a little differently. With me in the studio is our sports anchor, Ebi Iyomo. Let me hand over to her now. Ebi, take it from here.
Well, thank you, Ngozi. Well, we'll begin with the Super Falcons, where the head coach, Randy Wardrum, has appealed to the Nigerian Football Federation and the Sports Ministry to help the team prepare adequately for the Paris 2024 Olympics. The 9-time African champions secured their tickets to the Games last night after holding South Africa's Bayana to a 0-0 draw in Pretoria, qualifying 1-0 on aggregate, having won the first leg 1-0 in Abuja last Friday. The Super Falcons are indeed in a group of death at the Paris Olympics women's football event, where they face current world champions Spain, 2011 world champions Japan, and global giants Brazil. Meanwhile, the sports minister, John Enoh, commended the Super Falcons for qualifying for the Olympics for the first time since Beijing in 2008.
My plea and my challenge is to the Minister of Sport and to the Federation to help us prepare properly. We need a camp in Europe to prepare for the group that we have. We need proper training. We need proper transportation. We need to do things right because these women deserve this opportunity to go represent our country of Nigeria in the best possible way. And as we know, with this field being small in the Olympics, every team is top teams. And you look at our group, it's again, like the World Cup, it's the group of death, so to speak. So those are some things.
Meanwhile, in a break with 128 years of tradition, athletics has become the first sport to offer prize money to Olympic champions. Global medal winners will earn $50,000 at this year's Paris Games. In the modern Olympics, which started in 1896 in Athens, athletes have not received prize money from the International Olympic Committee. Despite this, athletes in many sports received hefty bonuses from sponsors for winning. Olympic silver and bronze medalists in athletes will also receive prize money, but only from the 2028 Los Angeles Games. Now to the Champions League, where 5-time winners Barcelona came from behind to earn a slender advantage over PSG in the first leg of the Champions League quarterfinals in France. Xavi's side were in danger of being overruled by a hostile Parisian crowd, but the Barcelona boss used his bench to magnificent effect to turn the tie in favor. Brazil winger Rafinha gave them the lead, sweeping home a loose ball for his first Champions League goal after Donnarumma could only parry a low cross. PSG responded immediately after the break, though, with Ousmane Dembele firing into the roof of the net after a poor clearance by Vitinha finding the far corner after being fed in the down right. Substitute Bayoka then had his other goal. Well, for the other match played, Atletico Madrid recorded a 2-1 victory against Borussia Dortmund. Studio alongside Ngozi here is the Minister of Sports, John Enoh. We'll be looking at a lot of things happening in Nigeria. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you.
Well, I think we would like to start with congratulating Nigerians and everyone for the Super Falcons breaking a 16-year jinx at the Olympics. Tell us what this means for Nigeria.
I mean, very worthy. I mean, it's a jinx has been broken, like you said, 16 years. And the truth is that this government has broken quite a lot of these jinx, in sports. I mean, it's under this government that Osimhen won the African Best Footballer of the Year after 24 years. I mean, it's under this government that, for the first time 11 years after, the Super Eagles played the finals of the African Cup of Nations. And after 24 years, the Super Eagles won silver. I mean, it's again under this government that a 16-year jinx that the female national team never go into the Olympics. For the first time again, they are going to go to the Olympics. So for me, it's very gratifying, and I think that Nigerians are happy at it. I mean, I was on this from the very beginning. I mean, I watched them, train before their first match against South Africa. I went to see them in their hotel where they were, camping before they flew out to South Africa, and I spoke with them, and I told them how much it mattered for them to qualify, both for their career individually and for our country. So I'm happy that it's all this is taking place under me as Minister of Sports Development. I mean, a lot of work is going on, but God has also been on our side, I must say. So we need to just keep doing what we're doing and just hoping that the sports sector will continue to give us those good results that will continue to excite Nigerians. Absolutely,
and Nigerians are definitely in support of that. They're hoping that things will continue to look up for Nigeria's sports. But let's talk about the Super Falcons coach, Randy Waldrum, who's appealing to the Nigeria Football Federation and, of course, yourself as Minister of Sports Development to ensure that you provide all the support for the the Super Falcons who've qualified for the Paris Olympics in this year, 2024. What are the specific things you're putting in place to ensure that they just don't participate, but they come back in flying colors?
Well, you listen to him, and I did as well. I mean, he struck the right chord.
Right.
I mean, early preparations. He talked about camping somewhere in Europe, talked about accommodation, talked about transportation, talked about a lot of those things. And I think that if there is one thing that has been the bane of our sports, development efforts and progress, is the fact that we look at the competitions too much. We don't pay attention to the preparations. We don't pay, don't forget, everybody tells you that the preparations for the next Olympics starts immediately after the end of this particular Olympics. That means, for example, that we're supposed to have started this preparation 4 years ago, but unfortunately for us, we haven't done so, but when we came out of the African Games, and I granted my first interview after going to the airport to go and receive the athletes, I had committed to the fact that we're going to start preparations for both the next African Games and for the Olympics, immediately. So what it is, what I can assure is that, unlike previous years, we're going to spend some more time in the various training camps, not just for football, but for the different other sports that we've qualified, for. We're going to make, put as much effort as we can. We've been able to get the results we've been able to achieve so far, outside the kind of leadership that, quite modestly we've tried to provide. By, the grace of God, like I said, also been on our side. But I think that we don't, for how much longer are we going to continue to just depend on that? So what I can assure, when I had a meeting with the Super Falcons before they left, and I had the chat with the captain, she had said that she was going to reserve whatever she wanted to request or demand from me till after they qualify. Incidentally, because of the nature of the fact that almost all the players are foreign-based. After yesterday's match, I think that nearly all of them have flown back to their different bases. So they are not able to come back as a team for us to have that conversation. But I think that the coach has already started a conversation on their behalf. We would take that and see.
Great. They've started that conversation, but I'd like to know the specifics. There's the issue of funding always. It's always a recurring decimal. The issue of welfare and the general, situation of the sportsmen and women when they go out there in a way that they'll be encouraged to give their very best. What are the things that you have in mind? What have you put in place?
Well,
beyond whatever they are, asking for.
Well, let me say this. First, having to go to camp early, it's a given. It's one of the things that will help. Because it gives them an opportunity to be together for much longer than just being brought 1 day or 2 days and go play match, right? Okay. And the bottom line is actually the funding. And for too many times I've kept saying that not government alone, but so far government alone. And we're working hard to see how we can turn that narrative to something else. We try to see how we can establish, the confidence of the private sector and the corporate bodies. We try to build trust, to them. Try to get them to understand that, look, those things that were bottlenecks in the past that made you to discontinue the funding and the support and the sponsorships, that the present leadership is available and is ready to give you the encouragement and to make sure that those things are no more there. Right. Now, very immediately, we're going to request for funds early, because that thing could be a problem. The funds are not just there. You need to request for them. As long as you only depend on government wholly, it means that you need to request for funds early and begin to follow up the release of those funds, just so that most of these programs can take place. There are a few things I've also spoken to. I spoke to both those who came from the African Games and the Super Falcons that left for the match in South Africa. I said, look, we have a few incentives we want to put in place for their welfare. And I said, look, there is no reason, for example, why our first-rate and class athletes cannot be placed on monthly salaries. I've said so to them. Right. And what do this achieve? It will motivate them. It will give them a sense of a future. I mean, if you look at the active years for any athlete, it's between a certain age range. What happens to them after they're no longer active? You know, so what we're going to put in place is going to take care of both athletes that are still currently in form and those that are retired. And I've tried to look at the calculations and the arithmetic. And I said, for example, I went for the African Games, about 121 medals were won. And they were in different categories: gold, silver, bronze. Now, and we're going to categorize this and see how much, if you're going to now commit monthly pay to these athletes, how much will it amount to? What will be that global figure? Right? And we keep moving on. No, so this will be motivational enough to get the athletes to know that welfare is taken care of. For the first time when we went to the African Games, all our athletes were insured. So there's going to be in place a continuing insurance policy to make sure that people who get injured, you know, while competing, people who, I mean, whatever happens to them and all that, they won't think that they're going to spend from their own pockets to try to take care of this. To get them understand that government and the country care and are concerned because of the kind of name they give to Nigeria, the kind of glory, the kind of international recognition. You know, each time that we win when we go abroad. Imagine what happened in South Africa yesterday. It was all about Nigeria, not so much about the individual athletes. Therefore, Nigeria as a country has to work hard to see how much it can compensate these athletes.
Great.
And this ministry is at the bottom of that. We have an agenda that recognizes welfare as number one, to treat our athletes well, both while they are still active and when they are out.
When I was talking about all of these, you have plans put in place or set to take place. We know that this needs funding. And in August 2022, and that's the past administration, there was the 10-year football plan, and also where sports we looked at a business plan instead of just recreational, but something to bring in revenue. So now, if you want to achieve all this, it needs funding. And like you have said, not just the government, what are the plans to ensure that sports in Nigeria is a business that brings in money to the country?
I tell you what, I mean, and if there's anything that has occupied me the most since becoming Minister of Sports Development, is this, you know, having to confront this problem of funding. This funding challenge, I've said it elsewhere, has been there for the past 10, 20, 30 years. We keep talking about it. No effort is actually being done. Okay, in 2022, we got the national sports, industry policy in place. But beyond the policy, the fundamentals are not there. There's nothing that is on ground to see how you can make that to work. It's up to my ministry at the moment to be at the forefront of trying to make sure that that works. In the last couple of months, I've been talking with different players in the private sector, corporate bodies. I mean, a few days ago, a certain chat by Tony Lumelu went viral, where I think somebody had called upon him to say I can get involved in football club ownership. And he chatted back and it said that the Minister of Sports has actually engaged him on this some months back. Right. What it means is that, I mean, this is being tackled. In the next 1 or 2 weeks, by the grace of God, I and the ministry will be signing some agreements with some private players. One of them is willing to put, before the ministry make available is online gaming network that can assist the ministry try to raise funds, either in terms of periodic raffle draws and jackpots and things like that. So the ministry is working hard. Great. Beyond that, agreement, about 2 or 3 other corporate bodies and all that will also be signing. All these agreements and MOUs we're going to sign are all targeted at what? Not just developing sports, but also seeing how we can get access to funding, which is direly needed. Yeah. I mean, when I met Mr. President before the beginning of, the end of last year, to intervene for football and the Super Eagles and all of that, and then intervened and approved close about 12 billion. I mean, I'd committed to him that, the way I see it going and the way I see how much work that I'm putting in place, I believe that the next 1 year, for example, it will begin to yield the dividends and we'll be able to see what kind of funding support we're able to attract and we're able to achieve. There's something, yesterday I missed the public holiday. I summoned, the directors of relevant departments in the ministry. We went to the office, we worked for about 5 hours. What were we doing? Because we're getting some kind of breeze from some people that are interested in getting the ministry to adopt what they call a data aggregator, right? That is going to take, care of, because the basic problem is even the lack of data. We have no data at all about our athletes, about how to monitor them, about our infrastructure, where they are located and all that. So we have working towards now getting a data aggregator platform that will be active enough and participatory enough, and will even be revenue yielding as well to the ministry and to the concerns that we've all been confronted with.
Very quickly, we can't wrap this conversation without talking about the what some have described as an embarrassment to Nigeria, where the Nigeria Future Eagles were denied visas by the Spanish embassy. And they're asking, how on earth could that have happened? Were you not able to use back channels to ensure that they got their visas? Why were they denied?
Well, I just heard that story the way you did. I mean, because don't forget, whereas we're a Ministry of Sports Development, but we also oversee different sporting federations, right? The NFF is one of the sporting federations. And that most of these day-to-day running of things and activities are actually handled by the different federations. And that when I got this indication, I really got across to the president of NFF. And I think that whatever caused that and most of the things that happened and all that are being sorted, as much as possible. But I mean, we regret what took place, and every effort is being made to make sure that the country is not, taken through such an embarrassment anymore.
Have you had conversations with the Spanish embassy?
Well, not yet.
Actually find out why they were denied.
I mean, not yet. The first person I had to call was the president of the NFF. And I think that it's only when it gets escalated that conversation is going to happen.
Well, we're still talking on the African Games. When we returned, there were talks of camp allowances and game allowances already being paid. Now, the winning bonuses, as the gold medals, the silver medals, and the bronze medals, have they finally been paid to these athletes?
Well, in this program, I just wish things were otherwise. But I find out that certain times good intentions have a way of delaying to happen, and things like that. Incidentally, although I'm not an athlete, I wasn't an athlete for that purpose.
But you look like
I was an official. I was an official and had my own little entitlements as well. Let me report that I haven't also gotten my entitlements. Not because I won't get, but because they're just going through some little delays that we're not completely in control. And I think that, it's, okay, when I addressed the athletes in Accra, in the Games Village, I had told them some change in the protocols. The fact that, how, they got money in the past had been changed by the CBN and all that. Everything now had to be mediated to the various bank accounts and all of that. We've been going through back and forth. Those that didn't have any problems with their bank accounts, their monies have been paid. Those that we've had cause to return to either make corrections in terms of what details of account that they sent. Those, for example, that are foreign-based, and there are in countries where they're using euro, we're going through a lot of all of that. There's a lot of back and forth between the ministry and the Central Bank of Nigeria. But all I can assure is that maybe in the past, there were problems about people being denied what they should get. The ministry under me, we're not going to experience that. The most that will happen is that if you're expected to be paid today, you may be paid tomorrow, you'll be paid next week. But their money will by no means not, get to you. It will get to you, right? And I need to assure everyone. People should be calm. Unfortunately, this week, almost the whole of this week is public holidays. But I can assure that between Monday and Friday next week, all this backlog, all those who haven't been paid, will be paid wherever they are.
That's gratifying to hear. Very quickly, let's even get a general picture of your agenda for sports in Nigeria. Because when we talk sports, usually it's football we're talking about. There's athletics, there's wrestling, there's boxing, there you go, there's kayaking, and all of that. What exactly is your vision? And don't forget disabled sports too, Parasports.
Yes, you're right. We just, from the African Games, we got 121 medals, and I think that we celebrated it. None of those medals came from football. Okay, yes, one. We got a silver. So we talk about football to the extent that we do because of its followership, because of its, and all of
no
that.
doubt.
But by no means is it the only sport. There are all other sports. And as Minister of Sports Development, I've had commendation from some people who have been close watchers because of the kind of effort and attempt I've tried to make to balance out interest and importance in terms of every other sport that is under the Ministry of Sports Development. Because eventually, like you've said, the glory that we've recorded hasn't only come from football. When I say, for example, that I have, a strategic, roadmap that has wafer, right, in WAIFER, and each of them stands for one of the focuses that the ministry under my watch is going to engage in. If we're talking about welfare, the welfare is not just for footballers alone, but for all of the sports. If we're talking about activation of sports as business, it's for all of the sports. If we're talking about infrastructure, it's not just football fields. It's infrastructure for all of the sports. If we're talking about early, childhood sports exposure and all of that, it's for all of the sports. If we're talking about reform of the federations, it's all of it, not just NFL. So that is standard, that is there. And I mean, I just talked about, it's, a data, aggregator platform. All of that, if you, for example, the data gathering, focus of the platform is going to capture every detail about every of our athletes in all of the sports. Athletes are going to be able to have a number, that you're going to use to monitor them throughout their career. I mean, there's going to be the one that talks about infrastructure management, that real time you'll be able to capture and know how many facilities that we actually have. So all of this is going to come in handy. And then talking about football, it's too many people have been too concerned, about coach, about this, about that. But there are a few fundamentals about our football that we need to be able to tackle. What are those fundamentals? I'll give you an example. The Super Falcons, to get them to come, right, and take part in the first match against South Africa and then go to South Africa and play the second leg match. The bill I got from NFF was more than 300 something million. Why is that so? It's because every of the players that is playing for the Super Falcons today has to be brought from abroad. If we had some number of them coming from within, that cost is going to be low. So one of the things we need to do is to confront what is happening to our local football, what is actually happening to it. I mean, there's a lot that is going on. You asked the question about sports as business, right? The sports as business thing is taking effect more in the underground and informal sector, not in the formal sector of government and the ministry. There's too much going on. A lot of business activities are going on in sports academies, in the various sports and things like that, not to the benefit of the country or government. Yeah. There's no monitoring, anything. So one of the things we need to do is to come up with a sports law. A sports law, I mean, we've talked about the sports reform bill. I mean, the power sector reform bill in telecoms and all that. The sports sector is so huge and it's so important that we need what? A sports sector reform bill that captures and takes all of this into consideration. Talking about when I mentioned about Tony Lumulu and the private sector getting into football club ownership, it's because I also believe that, okay, we are not able to sustain our sporting assets within the country. Somebody is 17, 18 and just learns how to play football. And the next thing, he gets exported. Yeah. What is the reason for that? It's because the pay for the footballers is so low. What is responsible for that? So once we're going to talk about issues of capitalization of the various football leagues in our country, to set a baseline. If you are playing in the Premiership, you own a club in the Premiership, there must be a certain amount that cannot pay a player lower than that, just so that we can keep our footballers. A country like Tanzania, for example, has a better football structure than Nigeria. You find Nigerians going to go and play football there. We need to reverse that trend. Right. Keep our footballers and make it attractive enough for other countries to also come and play football here. It will reduce the cost that we pay each time we have cost to bring our footballers to our country to play for us. It will give us the South African team that we played in AFCON, we may have defeated them, but about 7 or 8 of them play in South Africa. The female team that we played, we may have defeated them, but they have their fundamentals are better in terms of that structure. Right. About 6 of them play in South Africa. So it's easier for them to manage and to organize. So a lot of these things we're going to do, and we're not just limiting them to football, but to all of the sports, because all together they constitute what? The ecosystem of the sports sector.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll have to.
Well, finally for me.
Finally? Yeah, okay, great. Go ahead.
In 1996, Nigeria won the last gold medal at the Olympics. And now they are at the Olympics this time, as if with football. And we also have athletes, for instance, Tobi Amuso, Esi Brumel. What are your plans to ensure that Nigeria at least leaves the Olympic with a gold medal, not just silver or bronze?
Well, of course, that's my greatest desire. I mean, I started this program reeling out the various, records that we've broken, right? My hope is that the Paris Olympics will provide this government, will provide this ministry, will provide me one next chance and opportunity to break another record. Right? And that we're going to work hard. We're going to target some of those sports that are more likely to give us that kind of outcome. I mean, we're going to look at that and put everything that we can, right? If it's money, if it's funding, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone and approach, prominent sports-loving Nigerians and get them to support and to assist.
Fantastic.
Because ultimately, we go to the Paris Olympics and we get gold. It will mean quite a lot and plenty, not just for government, but for our countrymen and women.
Very well said. John Enoh is Minister of Sports Development in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight. I mean, just listening to you, a lot of young people will say, look, I'm going to take up a career in sports.